There's this concept in Ireland called thin place. And these were physical places that we believed that the veil between heaven and earth was thin. So you went in there, you felt different. Something was different. What is it about this place? And we all have places like that where we go and like, whoa, I kind of feel different here. What's happening? And I said, I wonder, can we really do that as human beings? Can we create a presence where a person who's in our presence really feels that time has stood a little still, that we're in the presence of someone who's truly listening, who's truly interested, who truly cares? And let me tell you, it sounds simple, very difficult to do because of the way, the rush we're in. But when we do it, the impact is powerful.
You are now listening to the Highlight Reel Builder for Authors, the Going North podcast. I'm your host, certified self-leadership trainer and author of the best-selling book, Stay the Course, Dom Brightman. And you're going to be getting some goodies today from the guest that's up next. And today on a super special, awesome podcast, loves to acknowledge ordinary humans doing extraordinary things that make them also extraordinary. Today is another one of those occasions because it's the Going North podcast. We got one heck of a guest for you today, folks, all the way from the DMV, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, baby. We got a champ in the building. My goodness, a fellow brand warmer from years ago. My goodness, we actually were area directors at the same time. I believe 2015, and we were actually the first two area directors to get our areas distinguished. And now my man, a couple years down the road, has his new book. He's now in the business of immortality. And he's also, at the time of this recording, the current president-elect of the NSA, the chapter, the DC chapter, the National Speakers Association. So let's give it up for the one, the only, super special, awesome Dr. Irvine Nugent, PhD. How you doing today, Dr. Irvine?
I'm doing great, Dom. Thanks for the invitation. Man, you just brought back some memories there. 2015, that was post-pandemic, and it sounds like decades ago, but yeah, those were good times.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. When you had to be apprehensive before giving somebody a hug if you knew them, and didn't have to worry about masks. Yeah, man, but now it's, well, I heard one person call it quasi-pandemic since things are starting to be lifted a bit, even though the COVID hasn't gotten in permanent hibernation yet. So interesting times, but it led to you becoming a member of the business of immortality because you put pen to paper with this new book, Leadership Lessons from the Pub, man. So what led you to write this book, man?
So, that's an interesting story. The actual book started out as something totally different. And I knew I wanted to write about leadership. That's what I work in. I wanted to write about emotional intelligence. And I think I was going to write more kind of an introductory text. And I knew I wanted to bring in my childhood. I grew up in Northern Ireland somehow, but I didn't know how. And so before the pandemic, I actually squeezed in a trip to Ireland. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to go there for 5 or 6 days and we'll see what happens. And so when I landed, I just had this impulse in the heart that said, go and visit where you grew up, go and visit your childhood. So I changed my trip and spent 5 or 6 days in Northern Ireland where I grew up. And out of that came, I beginning kind of, as I look back in my life, I begun to realize how powerful that experience was. I grew up, my generation is called the children of the Troubles. We grew up when the Troubles in Northern Ireland, which, pitted Protestants against Catholics and really turned into armed conflict and terrorism. And so that was the backdrop of growing up. And the more I thought about it, the more I said, this is really what I need to work about. So, or write about. So the book became very personal. There's a lot of me in the book. There's a lot of childhood stories growing up. And so that's really what it grew out of. And then, the other thing that it grew out of was, as a leadership coach, I got so many leaders coming to me over the years saying, how do you engage employees? How do you make the workplace more human? How do you make it a place where people want to belong? And so here you have this institution, the pub, which has been around hundreds of years. And in Ireland, at least, anyway, people call it their local. and they go there voluntarily. They have really interesting conversations that you're not expected to be the perfect person. You go there with your warts and all, as we say, and people could be vulnerable, share their ups and downs of the day. And I said, that's an interesting space to study, because I think it's got a lot of lessons for us. So that's really where the book came from.
That's what I'm talking about, indeed. So children of the troubles from children of success now, man, that's what I'm talking about. That's what it is now, because that book is out live and well, and people are going to be grabbing copies off the shelf if they have it. It's been out for a good, 4 months now, maybe?
A little less than 3 months. Yeah, just over 3 months. Came out on St. Patrick's Day, which I thought was an apropos day to release the book, considering everything. And so we had a St. Patrick's Day party, a virtual party, which actually you can still see on YouTube. I got some great musicians in. It was a lot of fun as we launched the book.
Oh yeah, definitely can see that again. It did. Congratulations. And it's so true about really the pub, especially folks who have been serving up the drinks, because it's oh, they tell you about your life story and everything. And it's all right, I know more about this person than I thought I would ever know, period. It's all right.
Yeah, there is. One of the things I mentioned in the book, if you ever go to at least a good pub, but certainly an Irish pub, and you're sitting there alone, don't be surprised if someone pulls up a chair beside you and kind of begins to chat, and you might think, oh my God, they're invading my privacy. But no, really, it's a beautiful thing. They're trying to bring you into the circle. They're trying to bring you in, and before you know it, as you say, you're talking about your life and what happens. And I've had some amazing conversations with people over a pint, and I learned things about them that I never would have known.
Oh yeah, heck, I think that's actually one of the lessons in your book on listening, because that's really one of the keys. You're gonna have to really listen to be in a pub.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the power of the power of listening, and how neglected it is. It's such an essential leadership trait that still today, even though we've heard it time and time again, we're still not good listeners.
It's kind of funny, because that's how when you said that, it's it just hit me. It's oh, no wonder it's talked about so much, because we say listen, but we don't actually do it.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. And the thing about it is, it's so funny. You go to a room, hands up here, how many people think they're great listeners? And of course, everyone puts up their hand. I'm a great listener. And then especially when you have co-workers in the same room, and people will give them that look. Really? Did you just raise your hand? You're and so we do. We think we listen, and I don't think we appreciate how many barriers there are just in living today in our world, that it just, it's not a good setup for listening. We're so busy, distracted, and we've so many competing interests that listening suffers.
Yeah, I can say that again, especially with these wonderful mini zombie apocalypse tablets known as the smartphones, as just one of the things that holds us back from being great listeners.
Yeah, the phone is the number one, that extension to our hand now. It's not even a separate instrument anymore. It's just part of our, I wonder if part of evolution will be that the human will come with a phone embedded into their hand, because it has become it does many wonderful things, as connected as, but boy, is it a distractor.
So we're all getting cyborg training. I love it. Oh man. So since we're on the subject of listening and being a great listener, and the phone being the main distraction, any suggestions for those who may need to be a good listener, even though they may feel like they're already a great listener already?
Well, first of all, I'll say three things. One is just a mindset. So in general, when you think you're the expert, it's a bad mindset. And I always say, have a mindset of being a beginner and being curious, because beginners ask great questions, and beginners don't make assumptions. And so just, even though you may think, hey, I'm a great listener, just say, oh, what more could I learn about listening? And then the second thing I would just say is, first of all, learn your barriers. We tend to get into patterns as human beings. So what are the patterns that we notice? So one of my patterns is that I'm always thinking of my response when the person's talking to me. So I'm getting the right answer. I'm like, oh, I could say this, I could say that. And of course, totally then. And I think I can I can, multitask, which of course we can't. So here I am, making up my answer and the person speaking away. Of course, I'm not listening. I have stopped at one stage listening, and here I am, formulating the question. So, that's one, but there are many different barriers. So just kind of look, what patterns do I notice? What gets in the way of my listening? And then the second thing that I would just say is to have little moments of check-ins during important conversations. So I think one of the most important thing is, it is humanly impossible to give someone 100% of our attention for 10 minutes. We're not made that way. So we're going to distract. And if you say you can, then either you're some Zen Buddhist monk who's been in a cave their whole life that can do that, but most of us cannot. And our minds drift. And so just have to be aware of that, and just to recheck in and constantly recheck in. And to really just kind of monitor yourself during a conversation, even a little, am I listening? Am I listening? And really kind of coming back again.
That's what I'm talking about. 3 powerful things right there. So of course the mindset, and what I really love, the best tip that I haven't even heard yet is the check-in, because that makes so much sense. And sometimes it even happens because sometimes managers may have, sometimes it could be a filler word for some managers, like, hey, does that make sense?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, when you think about it, like, I often say, we wake up in the morning and and it's like a train starts, and that baby gets going, and it gets quicker and quicker and quicker throughout the day. And there ain't a stop. It's just the express train to the end of the day. And that does not make for good presence. And, part of our presence is listening. And really what we want those moments of presence with another person. That, I mentioned that in one of the final chapters of the book. There's this concept in Ireland called thin place. And these were physical places that we believed that the veil between heaven and earth was thin. So you went in there, you felt different. Something was different. What is it about this place? And we all have places like that where we go and like, whoa, I kind of feel different here. What's happening? And I said, I wonder, can we really do that as human beings? Can we create a presence where a person who's in our presence really feels that time has stood a little still, that we're in the presence of someone who's truly listening, who's truly interested, who truly cares? And let me tell you, it sounds simple, very difficult to do because of the rush we're in. But when we do it, the impact is powerful.
Oh yeah, that's right. Definitely can say that again. Definitely can say that again, indeed, because I can't tell them how many times it's like somebody just left with a smile because you actually listen to them from our own experience with the library experience, where folks come in and try to attack the first person they see because they had a bad day at work or the traffic really got on their nerves today. And then they come in all mad. And then if you're able to diffuse them a bit, and then they leave feeling a lot better because they had someone that actually listened to them and their problems. Because yeah, you're so right. Like even with the pandemic that slowed things down, there was still a rush from some parts of our lives still in one way or another that we had to deal with. And now things are slowly getting to, I guess, better than what they originally were a few months ago. Like that rush is going to be coming back, and folks have to be ready to make sure they can come back different and actually better and not, well, not butter either. Don't want to be butter either, but you definitely got to come back and be ready for the
be melting all over the place. But yeah, I mean, one of the even talking with clients, what began as a wonderful thing, oh, I get to be at home, I get to spend time with my kids, this is great, this is kind of work-life balance. And then all of a sudden, it's this progress that I hear from so many people, that basically their work-life balance now got totally out of sync because there weren't definitive hours around when do I begin and when do I stop. And then it got all very gray. And all of a sudden, it's just this continuous work. And one of the things I try to create with people is creating healthy boundaries around it, that you really do. You need these definitive, this is work, this is play, this is, and all of that. And some people have lost that. So in the pandemic, and, that's causing burnout as well, even from home.
Oh yeah, you're right. You're right. Actually, one of my colleagues called it hello work.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I know. Well, I was in a conference a few days ago and it was good. You know, said, is Zoom fatigue real was the question. And she said, which I thought was a brilliant answer. She said, I don't know if Zoom fatigue is real. She said, but let me tell you, tush fatigue is real. I said, I said for 6 hours, meeting after meeting, I said, that's real. I said, that's really good. That's a good way of describing it.
You know what? That is so dark true. Tush fatigue. Yes, that is really what it is. That's really what it is. Yeah. That was kind of the drawback to it too. I was like, hey, wait a second. Wait, we can have longer meetings now. Wait a second. No, that's not the point of these. Keep it short and dark.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally. And of course, and no socialization. You know what happens, naturally, say when we're in person at work, you have your water cooler conversations, as you like to call them. You're kind of get, and what happened is, Zoom okay, we're on Zoom, boom, meeting, let's get to it. Okay, off, next meeting. Okay, off, next meeting. And there was no, really, we've really gone from meeting to meeting to meeting, and as each meeting goes on, our level of performance declines, and we've lost a little bit of the intimacy as well that came naturally anyway with work relationships.
You're so right. Like with that meeting to meeting and no transition period, it's like, click again. Oh, I'm back on the screen again. Like, oh darn, like lack of time. And then I'm pretty sure that's bad for folks to not really be in that peak performance state, since emotional intelligence is your wheelhouse too.
Yeah, no, it suffers. There's some amazing brain imagery that's coming out now from people that have been on Zoom. So the difference between people who are on Zoom with some breaks and then without breaks, and kind of the functioning of the brain and the greater ability of the brain to function. So, we can't, we're not built to have 6 hours of meetings one after the other. And if we do it, if we think we can, we're deluding ourselves. And really what happens is exhaustion brings in our performance. We're not listening when we think we're listening. Our creativity declines, kind of, especially if the meeting's around finding a solution to something, kind of the quality of what we're bringing up is not good. So it just has a knock-on effect in everything.
Oh yeah, definitely could say that again. So my goodness, what's been some of the couple gems of advice you've been giving organizations during this time, if they may have been going through that? Because my goodness, like you're so right, like problem solving and looking at other folks in Zoom cubes and probably trying to sneak and see if they have what book they have on their bookcase when someone's talking for too long and they're like, oh, I'm distracted. What's this problem trying to solve again?
Yeah, it's so well, one of the things I think it's important to talk about is just meetings in general, which are, what is the purpose of this meeting? So really, kind of the biggest bane in people, if you want to groan from a group of people, just like talk to me about your experience of meetings. And most people go, ugh. And, there's no focus to it. So simple things, especially if you're looking for creativity, if you look for problem solving, don't shove that for 3 minutes in the middle of a meeting and expect something, So I would just say, if you're looking to really address a problem, when you're looking for some creative out of the box, have that something separate and plan that separately. Plan that in a way that there's an inroad to kind of create something creative anyway, and even, change positions or something. If you're sitting in the same seat where you have the meetings, just get out of that and do something different. I've had an interesting experience where we kind of brainstormed a little bit and people went for a walk and everyone kind of called in, and they didn't have their videos on. They just called in. And so they were walking and then they had that meeting, and it was really interesting, kind of the level of creativity that came, because all of a sudden it was out of box thinking. It wasn't your typical kind of Zoom, and people were out, they were breathing, and it really created a really interesting experience. So I think you do have to be a little creative. And then the other thing is just with meetings is don't go for the back-to-back meetings. Build in 10-minute breaks between meetings, because if you want productive meetings, you're not going to get that with this back-to-back meetings.
Well, since this is far from your first rodeo, is there a question that you wish you'd be asked more often when you're on the guest side of the game on these podcasts?
So it's interesting, one of the things I love talking about, and people don't do a lot enough thinking about, is their emotional triggers. And we've been in a year where of a pandemic where literally our lives have been at risk. And I think at times we don't appreciate the impact that has in how we show up and the impact of our behavior. And so I think that's, it's a question I love to answer, and a question, that I think is important for people to consider as well and really appreciate.
Oh, yeah, definitely right about that. Because my goodness, folks will probably have new emotional triggers now with this darn pandemic. So how does one go about discovering those?
So it goes back to the thing we talked a little bit earlier about, we are creatures of habit. And it tends to be, our triggers tend to be not the first time they've been displayed, but rather if we look back, we begin to see some triggers. So the first thing is just a mindset of curiosity. Can we be curious about, when we show up and we get ourselves either doing things or saying things that, are just not helpful? And so part of that is, what happened here? What made me angry? What made me say what I did? What made me do what I do? And can I look back? And then when you do that, you say, okay, that was something that this person said. Okay, well, what was it about what they said? What value was being violated, or what was it that annoyed me so much? And then can I see patterns in my life where that has happened as well before? And I think so that kind of level of curiosity. I remember I was working, 3 or 4 months ago with a client, and one of the things that was a trigger for her is when people talked over her. And so she had a meeting every week, and there was a colleague of hers that would just, whenever she was speaking, he would kind of talk over her, and it just shut her down. And it was interesting, I said, well, explore that. I said, that's an interesting thing that's happening, an interesting behavior. And then she, I said, is there other patterns you can see when that's happened? She said, yeah, that has been a pattern. And then she even brought it back to, I can remember growing up being shushed at the table and saying, you're not supposed to talk. So it even went back to a trigger really formed in childhood, that basically the implicit lesson was I shouldn't talk at the table, And so then once you know that, then you can begin to kind of work with it and saying, okay, so the first step is just recognizing the triggers and recognizing, is it a longer term trigger, or is it something recently that happened? And the pandemic certainly is the cause of many, many triggers as well we're having as well. So, for some people, masks might be a trigger. Seeing the mask on is like, it's a reminder that there's this invisible virus out there and I'm not safe. And all of a sudden I feel my heart beating, and for many people, that was a real trigger for them.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And you're so right about that. And that story about the woman who actually got triggered by people talking over her, it comes stemming from childhood, reminded me of actually one of our past guests, Rihanna Milne. She actually talks about this being something that all folks should really look into before getting into a relationship with somebody, especially on a romantic level, because we all tend to have at least one of the 10 areas of childhood trauma that tends to go untreated nowadays. So yeah, man, like that's so darn true. Like there may be some stuff from childhood, like, hey, we gotta talk to a therapist about, like, get that checked out, and then just find that root of that problem and just root it out and just see, hey, this might even take me up to my next level. So that's solid advice right there. And you're so right. Like, I feel like that's not even talked about a lot, at least from a business perspective, because folks may hear the word trigger and like, oh yeah, that's just folks on Twitter, but no, it's actually something serious.
Yeah. And the way I come up with a word in the book about it, I said, we're all used to our fingerprints, and we know that everyone's fingerprint is unique. I said, we also have a trigger print, and our trigger print is unique. Some of us may have very similar triggers, some of us, when we see a snake or a spider, will scream bloody hell and jump on a desk at sheer terror. But for others, it may be a different trigger print, and what that will be unique to the way we were brought up and the experiences that we've had, both in childhood, in adolescence, and even in adulthood. And it's powerful to recognize that, and also powerful, especially as someone in a leader or management role, to recognize it present in other people too.
Mm.
So kind of, are we noticing kind of some of the triggers of other people? What gets them going as well, which is powerful.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Emotional intelligence in action right here, baby. I'm telling you, this is like the surface of it, too. Like, my man's got a whole freaking smorgasbord of talks and wonderful resources to share with folks if you're looking to bring this wonderful gentleman to your organization, help you out with that, because, like, my goodness, real leadership nowadays, like, emotional intelligence is required. You can't be IQ all day. I'm pretty sure we've gotten past that too with the whole IQ thing. It's all about the EQ now.
It is, I like to say IQ is important,
Yeah.
so is technical skills. You need both of those to be, but once that gets you in the door, but what gets you up the ladder is EQ. Because at the end of the day, we manage people, we work with other people. And there's an interesting exercise I always do at the beginning of some of the workshops. And I always ask people to think about, who's the most memorable leader you've ever encountered? Who's been the most memorable mentor? And then think about their qualities. And, as you begin to list those qualities, kind of what you hear is like, they were a listener, they were empathetic, they challenged me, they were interested in my growth. All of these different things happen. They had a great sense of humor. And then it's like, they're all in the domain of emotional intelligence. They're all in the domain of emotional intelligence. So what makes us memorable, what connects us with other people, and leadership is having people to lead, all of those connections are through emotional intelligence.
Woo! Need to give my man a preacher's robe because he's preaching the baby. It's so darn true, man. It's so darn true. Like, hey, leaders are leading people. People have emotions, y'all. They're not robots. They're not robots. Just because the smartphones are giving us cyborg training, that don't mean we're robots yet, y'all. We still got emotions.
Yeah, and one of the problems is that people forget that, and it's kind of like people always say, sometimes I'll work in scientific communities and they'll say, well, can we just not talk about emotions, or can we just be analytical? And I say, I appreciate the sentiment. However, I said, as human beings, that's just not how we're created. And I said, we cannot divorce our emotions. I said, nor would we want to, because I said, we're sitting here today, we've survived as human beings because we have emotions. They have gotten us out of difficult spots, they've kept us safe, and they've also helped us enjoy life and have pleasure in life. So yeah, we need the emotions. We can never divorce them from our lives.
Amen to that. Amen to that. We definitely need them in our lives to protect us. So I usually bring this up every now and then as a cake, but we're going to call it a different cake. So if you were to make a cake known as a person who is fully emotionally intelligent, what would be the ingredients of that cake?
Oh, wow. Oh, I've never been asked that question before. So let me see. The cake would have to have a good foundation, so a good base, because that's important. Very often we don't spend enough time in the base. The cake then would be a cake with many, many, many different layers, which would have different aspects and flavors, etc. The cake would look a little humorous, because humor is very important when it comes. It's one of the underrated emotional intelligence skills. That the ability to go into a room that's very tense and to be able to crack a little joke, which diffuses some of that tension and lets people have a conversation. So the cake would look a little humorous. The cake also, I think, would have a few nuts on top, because part of our uniqueness as human beings is that we're different and that we're quirky, etc. So I think that would be important as well. Yeah, and I think that's it.
Yeah, alrighty. There we go. Humor. My goodness, like, that's freaking awesome, dude. That's freaking awesome. Because, no, I really wouldn't think of that as being under emotional intelligence until you brought that example of being able to diffuse a room that's full of tension and everybody's on their toes and whatnot, trying to be all perfect and whatnot, or they may be stuck in a room full of people they don't like or whatever, and you can just able to diffuse the tension a bit with some humor.
Yeah, I mean, we know neuroscientifically now that humor connects humans in a way it's one of the quickest way to human connection. That's why we love humor. That's why and the humor I'm talking about, of course, it's not cruel humor or humor that picks on anyone, but this is just like a situation, that everyone's going through, and you can pick a little humor on it that everyone can relate to. And yeah, just that little breathing out and the ability to laugh can really create a space then where a kind of a great conversation can occur.
Yes, sir, indeed. My goodness, humor is the quickest way to human connection. My goodness, that's what I'm talking about. That's a one-liner right there. That's what I'm talking about. That's right, he's bringing the heat, y'all, bringing the heat. And I'm glad you mentioned the whole cruel humor, even though my listeners aren't that type. They're not the cruel type. That's the good news about it. Like, I don't think we need to throw that disclaimer out there, but who knows, there might be occasional strange one who's like, yeah, I got this pitchfork right here, I'm about to bring it out on people, and it's like, nah, okay, I'll put the pitchfork away.
Yeah, because you'll see what that humor is. The humor is not excluding anyone. What the humor is doing, it's including everyone. So everyone's in this situation, and we make fun of the situation. Whereas, we're making fun at this person here at that person's expense, and then that's where it divides and not unites.
Oh yeah, that's right. And it's all about unity. Oh yeah, that's right. Let's not divide. Save that for the math problems. That's right. That's right.
Little humor there.
Oh yeah, that's right. I do it on a daily, even if it's at my own expense on occasion, just for laughs and giggles. But hey, it's all good. It's all good. Well, we're coming down to the magical question that every guest gets to receive, and that is if you're to wake up tomorrow and you're 25 again, but this time in the current year of 2021 with all of your knowledge and experience, what advice would you give to yourself?
Great question. I think as I've got older, one of the things that I appreciate about myself or because of my childhood, because of growing up in the midst of violence, safety was very important for me. And that's impacted my life. And at times I think I've played it safer than I should have. And part of that's just, psychological safety, that need. So that it just was. And I think if I gave myself some advice, I would just say, don't always play it so safe. You can take more risks. It won't destroy you. And you might get further places. So I would just say, take more risks. Don't play it so safe.
Woo! There we go. Rock solid advice indeed. My goodness, yes indeed. Yes indeed. Probably one of the more popular tips when it comes to that question, because it's like looking back, it's like, oh man, I could have did more. Shoot. And now it's like, oh wow, it's 2021 and I'm 25 again. It's like, oh yeah, all right. Well, screw the safety a bit. Let me take some more action here.
Yeah.
within reason, some actual action in terms of goal achievement, not like jumping off of a darn plane without a parachute and trying to build on the way down. That quote only works in inspirational entrepreneurial speeches. It doesn't work in real life.
No, and especially I'm scared of heights anyway, so probably definitely not going to work. Because I think even in my new 25-year-old body, I'm still going to be afraid of heights. So I think I'm pretty safe there. Yeah.
Oh man. Well, for those who want to reach new heights by buying a bunch of copies of your fabulous book, Leadership Lessons from the Pub, what's the best way for folks to do so and keep up with all the stuff that you're doing?
Sure. So Amazon, of course, you can look my name or the book there. My website, which is irvinenugent.com, has a section there for the book, but there's also a great section there on free resources. So there, one of the things about emotional intelligence is really practical exercises. So there's some great practical exercises there to really help you kind of begin to grow and embody your emotional intelligence. And then finally, I just mentioned my YouTube channel. So every Wednesday, I come up with a 10-minute educational video around issues of emotional intelligence in the workplace. So feel free to go there and subscribe, and you'll get a really nice video on a different area of emotional intelligence every week.
Sweet. That's what I'm talking about. Hey, folks. Well, check all that wonderful stuff in the show notes. Be sure to grab a copy or 2 or 200 of his fabulous book, Leadership Lessons from the Pub, baby. That's right. Heck, there might even be a mug in it for you if you do. I'm just saying, just buy yourself a mug, put some beer in there and be like, yeah, this beer's teaching me some leadership now because I'm getting some leadership lessons from the pub right now, y'all. That's right, from the good doctor himself. That's right. So any parting words before we close up shop?
Each and every day we've lived in this pandemic where we've come used to an invisible virus, and our emotions are also in many ways invisible, and they are just as contagious as this virus. And so every day we get to sow the mood or the emotion that we're there, and it's important that it impacts other people. So I just say to, be deliberate in how you're showing up, be deliberate in the mood that you want to spread among others, and be protective of yourself when someone's showing up with a mood that you just don't want, and just realize that you don't have to embrace that as well. So yeah, that's my final word. Just be deliberate in the moods that you spread.
You just got done listening to another powerful, power-packed episode of the Going North podcast. I hope you really enjoyed what you heard. Go check out the guest stuff. It's all in the show notes on the website, donbrightman.com, and also reach out to those that you've just heard as well. And keep going north.